Greetings, my relatives near and far. My name is Leilani Begay. I am a program officer for our Stewarding Native Lands program at First Nations Development Institute. I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce guest speaker, Matthew Denetclaw. Matthew was born and raised on the Navajo Reservation in Shiprock, New Mexico. As a fifth-generation beef producer, it comes as no surprise that he has a great passion for the beef industry. Building a vast network of fellow agricultural enthusiasts has led to numerous opportunities, including earning a livestock judging scholarship, starting a show cattle operation with customers throughout the United States, and recently being elected to the board of directors under the New Mexico Cattle Growers Association. Congratulations, Matt. Matt continues to travel the country judging livestock shows and helping young cattle exhibitors through Sullivan Supply's nonprofit organization known as Stock Show University. At the Intertribal Ag Council, he serves as program specialist, where he helps producers throughout the Navajo Nation take advantage of USDA programs, which will help make improvements within their own agriculture product operations. It is my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Denetclaw. And Matt, I will pass it off to you.
Thank you, Leilani, for the warm introduction. And of course, thank you, Isabel, for the invitation. It's truly an honor to be here and to really just take up a little small portion of your evening. And with that being said, we'll jump right into what we are here to accomplish today. My name is Matthew Denetclaw. I am from Shiprock, New Mexico. And what I do in my family is we love anything and everything around what we consider Navajo agriculture. We've been at their farming and ranching for generations upon generations. I do consider myself a fifth generation producer. We have a place here west of Shiprock where we run our cattle, and it is fenced in and it's controlled, and that's what's really allowed our family to take advantage of a lot of the information coming down the pipeline when it comes to soil health and regenerative ag. And for those of you who are very familiar with policy and procedures on the Navajo Nation, it's not very simple for a family to have their rangeland encased. And in fact, most rangelands across the Navajo Reservation you'd find to be open range, and that in combination with people living on the same plot of land with different goals and ideas tends to create a lot of conflict, and it's unfortunate, but that's kind of where we're at currently as a nation. And in relation to many of the neighboring tribes, the issues are fairly similar, and that's probably a lot of it's due to policy that's very much been needing to be outdated, and a lot of that kind of comes down to the priorities in leadership, not really being focused around agriculture. And that's what I do within the IAC is I really want to assist leadership, decision makers, service providers with the idea that agriculture can be viewed as a solution, and what a better case study than the folks right here on our place, and not just on our place, but to those other clients who we assist as well, and everybody that we help, that we help to promote and lift. So what we see here is a picture of on the west side of our place here, and this wasn't very long ago. Actually, we're talking about 2018, and I think it's just a good picture to show of how well the land can look with when received with the moisture in combination with the management, in terms of utilizing livestock to manage the land and continuing to maintain a diverse species of plants and kind of doing things along those lines to help with the life cycle of the plants. And I think more importantly, though, from the emotional side of it is this land is also something that's very near and dear to not just myself, but my brother, my dad, mom, everybody. And that's because we have a deeply rooted ties into the land here, but more on that in a minute. Just want to show you some other stuff about what we do. And I think, so let me go here. So there's a quick picture of me and some staff members, and just kind of show you kind of what we do at the IAC. Part of it's doing some outreach events. So here we are at the Indian National Finals Rodeo, and there's my co-workers there, Elise David and Zane Not Afraid. Zane's coming up from Lodge Grass, Montana, and Elise is from up near Pendleton, Oregon. I'm also an auctioneer. I do several Mondays out of the month there at the Cow House auction in Kirtland. So that's extremely helpful in knowing a lot about the marketing side of livestock and providing that additional assistance to our producers and of course ourselves as a family, because we really need to make sure that we're getting the absolute best value for the product that we sell. And it's a really big decision maker when the time comes to wean calves and decide if that's something that we're going to keep and assist as far as feeding our communities through our beef business, or if it's something that we would rather basically kind of offload the additional risks of retaining ownership and just kind of taking the money right there up front and kind of being able to evaluate that year by year, depending on our current situation relative to weather and everything else that we have in terms of taking care of the land. You know, how does that all work together? And I think that's where I owe a great bit of gratitude is to the School of Auctioneering and learning how to appraise, market, and kind of move forward in that direction. I also like to do a lot of photography for youth. Show photography is what we like to call it. So at the livestock shows in the area, they'll use me to take photos of the kids, and we'll have those available not just for our purposes at the IAC, but also just for the families to hang on the wall and be able to capture those memories for those families. And for me, this is where not only do I get to express myself in terms of art, but more importantly, it's something that I use as a great, I should say, not just a hobby, but to be an asset, really, to give back to the youth and to the program that has raised me, because all these kids, including myself, were in the 4-H and FFA programs, and we raised livestock year after year to feed our communities, and of course everything that's involved with that, learning about the work ethic and keeping consistent with taking care of your livestock on a schedule, knowing the science of animal nutrition to make sure those animals feed out to the absolute best in terms of their genetic potential. There's so much around that these youth have gained throughout the years, and including myself. And this is where any and all of the opportunities that I've ever received in my life was rooted in this program. So, and there's just an old photo of myself back in a long time ago, I would say, in 2010 or so, there at the Mexico State Fair. We had a reserve market lamb there, which is a really high honor for my brother as well as my family here. We had the distinct honor of winning a national cattle show there in Phoenix at the Arizona National, and exhibitors from all over the country, and we were the very best that day. So, you know, a lot of great memories there with the family. And now through my job and my capacity, I continue to give back to those youth and the families by marketing the livestock to those families as well, and helping them through their success which again only raises the awareness of production ag on the Navajo Nation. And of course, that commands the attention of those who want to provide opportunities to those in underserved communities. So that to me is something that's extremely important, and why I continue to do this. And that's where my passions truly lie, in assisting the youth. So with that being said, that, and of course, just giving back in general by sharing information, knowledge, and experience with our fellow producers, in any given opportunity. So with that being said, that takes us right back to where it's all rooted in terms of family history and generations, which is through the land. And this is looking north from our place there, and we have a fence line that runs on that right side of the highway. And everything that you see here is absolutely how great everything can be, just with the good moisture and the good management and all of those things that go along with it. We don't see a ton of encroachment in terms of any particular species, whether it be noxious weeds or cheat grass or anything along those lines. And as you can see, the ground cover there is good enough, I would say, in terms of the area. It does put a lot of color into the hills, and that's kind of what I enjoy most about the land management side of what we do in terms of production ag. There's my great grandmother, pictures taken back in the 1960s. Our family raised a lot of Hereford cattle, and prior to the Hereford cattle, they also raised a lot of the Rambouillet wool type sheep. And this, to me, of course, is something there that we treasure. And we say that because we actually had a house fire back in 2012 or 13. So we ended up losing a lot of the old pictures that were kept in photo albums. So we only have a couple of photos that some family were willing to share with us, which is fantastic. But I think there's one picture there that I'm going to hang on to for a very long time, and I think it's just another good representation of just how deeply rooted we are as agriculturalists. And that continues here through my late grandfather there, my dad's dad. And as you can see there, it's, even though we're currently on the farm in that particular picture, the husbandry and the responsibility and the passion for the cattle and the land has never ceased one bit, and it just continues and it continues. And there's today, we do market a lot of breeding bulls to local producers in the area. Through the livestock auction, we've actually been able to establish an annual sale for breeding livestock, so producers don't have to travel extremely far to find livestock to replicate and improve their genetics. So that's something that we were proud to improve on. Today, we've have transitioned away from Hereford cattle into what we call the Beefmaster cattle. And the Beefmaster cattle, they're more of a Bos Indicus type cattle, meaning that they carry more genetics from south of the equator, for lack of better words. And with that genetic influence, you get a fairly substantial addition in terms of heat tolerance, resistance to external pests. And of course, the cattle perform extremely well in our harsh environment. In terms of the desert, and they can continue to graze and be producers, whether it's super duper cold like it is here in this winter photo, or if it's over 100 degrees in the middle of summer. And that's kind of where we've transitioned as a family, and that's a decision that we've made. But the Beefmaster cattle are 1/4 Hereford, so that is one thing that continues to keep us tied to the Hereford breed. But of course, along that, you have your You have the Hereford, the Shorthorn breed, and the Brahman breed. So actually, it'd be 1/3, not a quarter, but 1/3 of each. And as you can see, once again, they're just dialing back a few years. Cattle perform well. The cows will raise, very high performing type calves. And as you can see there, that one is not any slouch in terms of size. And of course, we're not even, I would say, 2 weeks into August in that photo with the calf being born in March. And there's a set of cattle we have, one that'll be like these calves here, a little larger and older in terms of size, being born in March. And I think that's what'll best fit a lot of our customers who choose to buy our bulls and some of the heifers to improve their genetics. And then we also have some other cattle that will be born into May to mid-May. And I think through that's kind of what helps us in terms of keeping our labor costs down, allowing cattle to eat when the grass is at its absolute best as the temperature begins to warm up, and we can extract more nutrients out of the rangeland that we have. There's just a wintertime photo there, just kind of show you what wintertime will look like in our area. And as you can see, everything does dry up on us, but with just a little moisture, we can see there the ground is fairly moist, which is a good thing. And from there, just with continuing to move cattle over the top of this area, we can continue to pound into seeds and continue to encourage that herd effect on the land. And there's a result of that the following spring, which, as you can see, just with a little moisture and a little extra warmth and the calves here kind of hitting the ground, the really nature takes care of itself. And I'd say if there's only one thing that we really want to improve is just to continue to kind of have these cattle trump all over the ground and try to get more of those seeds in the ground so we can have more ground cover. Because you can see there, if you were to throw your hoop at just the right spot, you would certainly have a greater majority of bare ground than you would ground that's covered. But that is tough to do with the numbers that we have in terms of cattle as well. And the reason why is the Navajo Nation does limit every producer on the number of cattle they can run, no matter what size of a place you have or how well you're taking care of the land, or regardless of any of those circumstances, you are limited to so many units of livestock. So without the numbers to really create a true herd effect over the land, we're not able to accomplish our goals as quick. But just, again, through that daily management and some additional supplementation that we do to bring the cattle in our direction every time that we come driving across the place there, that's what will aid in that process. And here's kind of where we are as of last summer. Okay, you can see that we've had a pretty dry year, and we can start to see more of the ground exposed. A lot of the grass that was really full and bunched, it did tend to shrink down there with the grazing. But on the positive side for me was, just seeing a lot of the hoof prints in the ground and seeing that the cattle have done their part to make sure that we're continuing to manipulate the ground as far as breaking the surface. And this will lead us up to the spring of this year. And again, it's really dry this year. Unfortunately, it's not very green, but you can still see that the grass is tending to hold itself together, and we're doing okay. But there's definitely more work to be done on that side there. And this is kind of a sad reality that we're currently facing just through and this is the result, I should say, of course, of the policies that we currently see through our local government, our state government. I mean, our local government, I should say, here with a lot of the overgrazing that's been happening, and the inability of people working together. And this was actually taken here as of a couple of weeks ago. And that's just because, with the overgrazing and everything, we tend to get a lot more dust in the area. And it's unfortunate, not just for them, but it affects us as well, because a lot of that soil that will blow off of their place ends up on ours. And when we have a lot of those baby grasses that are just, very in the very beginning stages of that phase one, and it ends up getting buried by sand that's been blowing around, then that's only going to inhibit our ability to manage the land as well. And that's due to the consequence of the inability of everyone being able to work together. And there's just another photo there of that same process. And if you can try to zoom in a lot closer to either the left or right side of the highway, you can just see maybe about a good yard. There's probably about a yard or so between every plant, and that's not how things are supposed to be. So with that, here's just another evening shot there, kind of the aftermath of that. And you can see a lot of that surface soil has blown off the top, and now we're gonna have to start all over again, basically, as far as having to run cattle through there and break that surface tension and hope that we're gonna be able to reseed the area. And I know the weather and everything, it comes and goes in cycles, but it's going to be a hard year for us, as it is going to be for a lot of other producers in the area. But until we tend to see some rain and see some other folks beginning to improve, this is what we're going to have to work with for the year. But we are fairly resilient, okay, as people, and that's one thing to be thankful for. No one's ever thinking about pulling the plug anytime soon, and that much there I can say is something that we pride ourselves in. So, and that of course leads to our little farm here that we have, my brother and my mom planting, and even though it's going to be a tough year, we're still going to plant anyway, and that's just because that's what we do as people. We have to plant, and we have to continue to carry on and take care of ourselves. It may not be the best year, it may not be the most economical year, but we're going to continue to manage our livestock, manage the land, continue to plant, continue to farm, and we just hope that we're able to get something that like we see here. And this is something that I've tried here in the last couple of years personally as a farmer, and trying to go with a no-till type system. And as you can see here, just with the, everything that's contained within the soil, and just having water and our good work here on the ground, it's really tough to try to grow vegetables on our place here with the soil being the way that it is. So we ended up having to till and get everything under cover once again. But I guess we're just going to start over and see what happens. But it's definitely a lot of trial and error. We did plant the oat cover crop on this, and hoping that would have aided in that process. We can see we've gotten taken over by a lot of weeds and leftover grasses back when we were growing hay on this place. But still, we've done fairly well as far as growing melons and everything. And with that being said, that puts us right at the 6 o'clock hour. So I will leave my brother on the screen, and I'll be happy to take any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Matt. That's really great. So yeah, invitation to everyone to raise their hand, or if you want to put a comment or a question in the chat, that's also good, whatever works for you. I think we're all just digesting this a little bit. That was really great to see. I had never seen your place, and I'm just stunned by the beauty of it, to be honest. I had seen photos of yours, but I didn't realize that this is actually where you live and work. I had just assumed there was like a promo photo in front of Shiprock, but this is really your view of your ranch.
Yeah, we've had it for a very, very long time, and there's even great relatives of mine that are actually buried on the place too, and so there's a lot of that, and that just again continues to show how long we've been on the place and how long everyone's thrived and survived. There's old home sites on there too at the Hogans, and really neat places there that only our family knows about, and that's I think that's a little reward in continuing to maintain and be good stewards of the land.
Yeah, super special.
Mhm.
We have one question here from Laura, and Laura, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I can unmute. Thanks so much for sharing all those details with us, Matt. I just wondered, when I've learned a little bit about cattle and regenerative, I wondered how often your cattle are regrazing the same area, and how that kind of plays into your management and the vegetation.
So we have, it's approximately about, if you were to think of it as a rectangle, even though our place is not a rectangle, but it's running from east to west, it's going to be around 10, 11 miles in length by at least another 7 to 8 miles wide. And that rectangle is divided into 3 separate pastures, or 3 separate sections, and we basically kind of run the cattle up and down, going from north to south as far as moving water and moving supplements. So they, in a way, they act like lawnmowers basically, and we just kind of continue to go back and forth every other week, and from there they basically spend 3 separate seasons in 3 separate pastures or sections. And then the one section on the far west side, that's actually been set up back in the late 70s with an Allen Savory system through the Bureau of Indian Affairs assistance. And we continue to use that to this day as well for our bulls and our elite females that we keep back, and we'll continue to rotate cattle throughout that system as well. So it's like on the first 2 sections, we're basically running them like lawnmowers, kind of doing that regenerative grazing pattern that we've learned through Mr. Bob Kinford. And then on that third side was something that was established long before my lifetime. That's where we'll continue to rotate cattle around and around and around. So yeah, there's definitely plenty of movement in that area, and it's something that I think for most people, they would just take one look and assume that it's continuous. But yeah, there's a lot happening out there.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Elaine, I'll come to you in a second, but I actually wanted to follow up on that a little bit. And Matt, if you want to stop sharing so you can see us, do feel free. There you go. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to follow up on that a bit because you mentioned the herd effect, and I'm not assuming that everybody would know what that actually is. And then what I found really interesting, which I didn't know, is that actually on Navajo Nation, you're restricted in how many animals you can have. That seems crazy. And why is that important? Why would you like to have more animals?
So in terms of herd effect, the idea is basically pounding hooves to break the surface, to replant seeds, to to take half, leave half, or in some years we're doing, take a third, leave 2/3. And the idea of why you would want more animals is because you can do that more of a high intensity type of a system to cover more ground in a less amount of time. And with the land that we currently have secured, it's to where we can run more head of livestock, but just simply due to an age-old system that the tribe currently has, producers, again, are strictly limited to the amount of livestock that we can run. It's basically where the government and the tribe got together and just issued out these permits to individual tribal members and said, here's your permit, here's your permit, here's your permit. And that's a system that hasn't been updated for decades now. And it's gotten to a point to where people have divided up those permits. So even more people are on permits, but they have less cattle to run, or livestock to run in general, I should say. And the reason why that these things get divided up is a grazing permit is almost an equivalent to like a deed to a piece of land, because with a permit, you can apply through tribal government systems for a home site. You can apply for water projects. You can apply to try to get electricity, some of those things. And that's the essential piece of paper that says you have a tie to the land on the Navajo Nation. And that's what makes those things in extremely high demand, and why through just the years of people, generations going by, that it's created a lot of conflict. And of course, in a small tribal court system where much more greater problems exist, those things take precedence over land issues. So it is unfortunate, but that is the reality.
Mhm. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so it has the unintended consequence of limiting your ability to really do intensive grazing. Yeah.
It would be nice, because I really would, if possible, we'd still run about the same number of cows, but a guy could certainly go and look at investing in buying wean calves to retain and feed for a particular amount of time before it's time to send them off to processing. So there's tons of opportunities on a place like ours to do backgrounding and just really in general, just kind of raising up other folks' livestock, who, especially if they don't wish to retain ownership of their calves. And I think that's kind of a really neat direction to head, because there was actually a producer near Wichita Falls who I met, and we toured their place, and they have a full-on a regenerative grazing system through temporary fencing, and that's all they do. They just buy truckloads and truckloads of cattle, and they'll bring them in and just basically run them through their place strip by strip. And when it's time for them to go, they send them on their way. And I thought that was a really neat system, and that would be something that we could implement if we had the legal ability to do so. And I think that just continues to inhibit the capacity and the potential for agricultural production on our reservation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Elaine, go ahead.
I just want to say, Matt, how moved I am by what you just shared with us. There is very modest cattle raising in my family history from a long way off, from Western Kentucky. Mm-hmm. I know a bit about cattle raising and the relationship with those animals that happens. What I am a volunteer with the organization that's titled the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity. And one of the things we are concerned about is about the food supply chain in New Mexico that has so many gaps between farm or ranch to table. And I wonder if you could say a bit about what happens, what's your process when you are ready to send one of your cows to market?
Okay. So in terms of the process, the first thing that we do is, of course, we'll just take a look at the land. Is the land, can it sustain the amount of cattle that we have on it currently, in terms of retaining calves to grow on a separate place and continuing to basically, again, let them grow? Or is it going to be time to just move on and we just have to let them go? Or we'll just retain a handful back that we'll just have to hand feed for the clientele who demand our product, and of course have the ability to pay for it. So that's the first thing that we do, is we'll have to evaluate the land itself and just kind of make that prediction. Can we make it work this year and not have to jeopardize the future of our place in terms of our natural assets. So once we kind of make that determination, the next thing that we do is just kind of run a quick analysis of where the market is currently and where it could go. So we'll sit down, we'll kind of watch those commodity trades for about a week or so and kind of see where the futures are looking. And then we'll weigh that out in relation to what we did last year. And then I have a guy who's trying to get me into doing some hedging and stuff, but we don't have the means of doing so right now in terms of sending out truckloads at a time. So in the meantime, I keep in contact with him, and he'll just kind of let me know what they're pricing cattle at in terms of forward contracts. And that's kind of my big determining factor there. And once we do that, then we'll kind of weigh that out there for what the cattle weigh today, what they could weigh at the time of sale. And overall, is that something there that we can afford to do? And of course, having that one last follow-up call with our local processor, which is actually an hour and a half away into Durango, Colorado, and making sure that they have that room for us that they will promise us. And usually they're really good about it, but sometimes some things can change. And if you can only send half or less of what you were promised to the local processor, that's kind of like a bottleneck that we currently are facing here in New Mexico. Then I have to go send cattle either into further down southern New Mexico or into Arizona. And from there, you got to continue to weigh it all out. What's the price of fuel? I got to send those things out that direction. Then I got to go down and get them. And where are we running on that basis? So yeah, there's a lot of numbers to run and kind of making it and seeing what's going to work for us. And at the same time there, just getting our overall prediction of what our turnover is going to be in terms of product, because in this area right here, we have a lot of families that have a very low median income. And our product is definitely looked at more as a luxury. When we have customers coming to us, they're asking about, steaks and burgers and roasts. And there's usually an occasion that goes along when our customers approach us. It's dad's birthday, son's graduating, our daughter's, having the first baby laugh party or something along those lines. So it's usually an occasion when we have local clientele approach us for our products, and we have to be able to send them off with as much product as we can to increase that turnover, because once they come and see us, it's probably going to be at least a month or later before they come to see us again. And we don't quite have that consistency there in terms of a local retail market, especially by going to a farmer's market every week. Usually we end up about breaking even if we're to do the farmer's market route, whereas we can try to retain those customers who view our product as a luxury and just sell off those packages to make sure that we're getting all those cuts out the door, rather than kind of getting a package of burger here, steak there, and then we end up kind of being left with flank steak and oxtail. So there's a lot to evaluate on that end of it as well. But thank you for the question.
It sounds as if it's very expensive and stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
local processing.
I'm sorry?
You don't have local processing. It sounds as if it's expensive and stressful.
Yeah. And that's the same story for everyone else. And the only reason why we do it is just because we want to play that role in feeding our communities with the absolute best in terms of a very nutritious product. And that's something that we pride ourselves on as a family. So it's definitely not about the dollars. If it were, then we would definitely be doing something else.
Right.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really interesting. I'm going to go to Dee and then Andrew.
So I'm also, Matt, I'm also with the Alliance for Local Economic Prosperity. And we're very interested in what ways we can learn more about what's happening in the Navajo Nation in terms of food security, and how we can, how this organization could be helpful to you if if the opportunity presents itself. One thing I want to say to you is, wow, I'm so impressed with all the work you do with youth to help them, to help with 4-H and FFA, and help them learn about how to do this in a sustainable way, how to grow livestock in a very sustainable way. And that means learning so much about the soil, of course, which is just totally critical. I was just wondering if you had any more, if you want to share any more information about how individuals get permission to actually fence a portion of the land and to be able to use it as in a primary way. And then secondly, my question would be, if you want to expand getting different kinds of livestock, for example, as you did with getting the Beefmaster cattle, where would you go to get loans to be able to do that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
So just a couple of questions if you want to speak to those.
Sure. So for the first part there, in terms of assisting youth, the main goal there, of course, is having them be successful in that show ring, because it is competition, and it is, all, not only that, but kids and competition. So with that, the opportunities flow through competition, basically, and when a kid's doing a lot of winning in the show ring, it's like the feed companies want to learn more about them. They want to assist them by offering more discounts. They can continue to kind of promote the family, increase sales. And it's not just on the sales side, but a lot of those corporations are really good about offering future opportunities for those youth. So when you tell them, hey, once your show days are over and you need a summer break from school, why don't you come intern with us, or kind of work down those lines, and those internships turn into more opportunities in the future, whether it be a career or another form of compensation. When it comes to the building blocks of having some land fenced in, what it really boils down to is what we call Navajo Fundamental Law, and it's fundamental law that applies for everything through the Navajo tribe and Navajo people. And through the Navajo language, that word basically means like a togetherness. And when you apply Navajo fundamental law to any and all regulations on the reservation, it's basically you have to ask permission and have the blessing of everyone around you in order to accomplish whatever it is that you're trying to do. So if I have a house here and my neighbor wants to build a house next door, even though I have absolutely no interest or stake in the land that person is on next door to me, that person still has to come to me and basically petition to have their place constructed or be approved to have their place built and receive water and power and whatever else they may have. And the same thing with fencing and rangeland. So if you have 3 or 4 separate families on the same piece of land, and one family wants to fence it in, and all it takes is just one other person on that petition to say no, and the whole process has to go back into an appeal process. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of the way the tribe functions. And in that process, of course, that's all through traditional knowledge and traditional thinking. But we don't have that. It's not very common anymore, I should say. We don't have a lot of families in this generation and even the generation prior to, where the Navajo language and culture is the first language and their first religion. You know, we have a lot of families that are now, you know, for English is the first language. Christianity is very likely their first religion, you know, and everything else comes second. So when those two things clash, then it clashes pretty hard, and in a way you could almost say that it doesn't work anymore. But in the meantime, the folks who run the tribe hang on to that Navajo Fundamental Law. They think that's something that should be retained. Otherwise, you end up losing your culture, you lose your language, and you know, everything will come down as a consequence of it. So there's a lot to weigh out in that process, and it's been interpreted I don't know how many times, but it's very much a catch-22.
Thank you. In terms of access to investment.
Oh yes, sorry.
What exists on in the Navajo Nation to be able to help young people with getting started, say in the cattle industry?
So yeah, the FSA is definitely able to service the young producers here in the area. I myself being a client of them, but the only issue with the FSA that many people are unable to deliver on is the need for that 150% collateral. That's a hard line. So, you know, there are people who have been very successful through it, but there are also many other folks who just kind of see that and they walk out the door, which is where a lot of your other programs like through the IAC, we've helped found Occupan, which is a Native community development financial institution, where we look at it more as an investment than a loan, to where the producer can obtain a loan for 10% in terms of the return on that ROI. But obviously it's going to be stretched out for a much longer term than your typical 7 years than you would as a regular financing type person. So anyway, so programs like Occupan, and there's plenty more of them out there that are doing very similar work, and we appreciate all the organizations who are kind of in that CDFI process. But it's a good Band-Aid is how I like to put it, but still it's not a very wise investment on many people's part to be looking at a 10% ROI over an extended period rather than shorter terms. But at the same time, you don't have that collateral to leverage in the first place, so it's really your only option for the time being.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. So Andrew, thanks for waiting patiently.
Sure. Well, good evening, Matthew, and to everybody else, and big shout out to Isabel for giving us this format and forum to share our experiences, and you know, for the overall good and whatnot. Matthew, I want to take the conversation just for a moment. I've got a couple grandchildren scurrying about, so I can't hang too much but I want to take the conversation more for a technical on ground management direction. But do want to share with you that I married into a Navajo family. My wife's Yvonne Arviso from Crown Point, and you know, and she's always told me there's the powwow side of the Indian world, and there's the rodeo side. We're on the rodeo side. Just kind of just to give you that break, and they've run cattle their whole lives outside of Crown Point, a 6x3 mile patch of ground, a rectangular patch of ground that's been subdivided multiple times, you know, per the process that you've expressed, and this really this lack of it's this one, it's a real hard two-stepper to be able to incorporate new scientific learning on land management opportunities while you're interfacing with the cultural context of a Navajo tribe and their leaders, in many instances, not in all, but in many instances, trying their damnedest to preserve their culture as it seeps away into mainstream America, right? I'm illustrative of that, right? I'm in Los Lunas, and my wife, God bless her, is doesn't speak Navajo as much as you'd like to, right? And is not taught my daughter, much less my 3 granddaughters, the language. And so there's this constant seep of cultural context and richness of you know, the Dene people that is just it's almost insurmountable, right? It's going one direction. And there's some beachheads, and I love the reacquisition of language and culture that the Navajo people have been able to manage better than almost any other of the Navajo, any other of the First Nation folks, because of your size, right? So anyway, I just want to acknowledge all of that, those really complicated cultural intersections that in for tonight's forum, you know, really directly interrelate with how you manage the land. How do you incorporate new learnings into a culture that is traditionally, you know, seeping through, you know, and getting diluted, and they're trying to protect against that. So, but my technical question, sorry, I'm going to pull you to the middle Rio Grande here for a moment. So I'm the manager of the Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area, which is part of the Valencia Soil and Water Conservation District. We're one of 47 SWCDs in the state, right? And so we have this unfunded mandate to try to interface with all of the 47 of us. We happen to have Isleta and Laguna Pueblos as part of our district. So it's especially critical for us to interface with the tribal nations. But on April 11th, the big hole fire moved through our complex. Whitfield Wildlife Conservation Area burned 75%. We lost beautiful old 100-year-old cottonwood trees that won't come back. We're not managing fires down here, right? We're not fighting fires. We're not managing the bosque. We're trying to protect structures when we get the chance. We at Whitfield were a staging area for the firefighters. God bless their hearts. I'm so indebted to them. But their helicopter grabbed all these 350-gallon buckets out of their water pumpkins that were situated on our open field at Whitfield, and went to fight fires, property issues at their neighboring neighbors, right? Which God, you know, and luckily only one house was lost, but still, that was where the available fire department opportunity was to fight property loss, not in the bosque. So long story short, the silver lining in our experience right now is we can rebuild Whitfield. We're smarter. We have good science. You know, I've had this job for 2 years, but I come from almost 30 years in Department of Natural Resources, working in hydrology. I'm a National Wildlife Refuge background. But the real opportunity here, as we mourn these 100-year-old trees, is it's the silver to the gold opportunity. Is we have a property 3 miles south of here called Rio Abajo Conservation Area, the under river, the land down under river, and it's 150-acre mix upland and riparian. But there's this strip of riparian. There's a 50-acre nucleus of these 50-year-old cottonwood trees that are middle-aged, right? So they have another 50 years potentially of life, but it's kind of like this sweet spot in the valley. And underneath it is this 100% non-native invasive understory that's ready to burn any second, right? It's the biggest fire, and with fuel ladders left and right, and it's just ready to go. And we're trying to push a cohesive, larger scale approach to this land management issue, because we're not managing the bosque now. We haven't for 50 years. I won't profess my politics, but they might be left of center, but I won't swear to that, right? But here's my conversations I've been having with conservative leaders in my Valencia County which is a conservative county right now, they always echo back to a regenerative agricultural theme. They don't say it in those many words, but they say, hey, my grandpa, when he was on the river and he was running cattle or sheep or goats, there wasn't any fires because we were taking care of the underbrush through grazing, right? And I'm ready to take advantage of that. I want to go for my 50-acre little slice of our managed. We own the property. We can do it. Don't really need to ask permission of anybody. It's outside the levees. It's not a federal action. I don't need NEPA necessarily. Or I'm knocking on Middle River Grant Conservancy's doors to expand that to 500 acres.
What is your question for Matt?
So I'm sorry. The question is the 500 acres would have this component of a fuel break, a system of fuel breaks that would go through the 500 acres. It's a river mile long. And we want to bring animals onto those fuel breaks and have those animals be managed under contract with a rotational grazing program as a way of reintroducing the animals into the environment, which is a great soil health component to this evening's theme, but also building on regenerative agriculture concepts as Matthew has articulated. So I'm almost just, it's a cartoon right now. I have a cartoon with eight lines down the little corridor of fuel breaks, but does that sound like a reasonable proposition to be able to get a contractual connection with a grazer who could make this economically feasible to run through? I'm thinking it's 2,000 foot long wide, 100 to 200 foot, about 2 acres per. And then fire professionals I'm working with says you're going to need 6, maybe 7. So it's 20 acres of grazable land. Is that a rotational pattern that you think, from your experience, would actually be feasible in the context that I've tried to articulate here? Sorry to consume the time, but I wanted to set the foundation.
Mm-hmm. There was a post I've seen somewhere of someone buying the whole, like, I don't know, it's probably about 2 trailer loads of goats, and I think they're on more north of Albuquerque, but it was actually somebody who provides a service of basically leasing or renting out their goats to come and graze on areas. So you'd pay that person to basically bring a load of goats, and they would manage it and take care of it for you. But on the other side of that, like I was saying, if you were to study the markets and kind of see where those highs and lows are, then you can take advantage of an opportunity to buy the livestock first at a lower price, graze and manage, for the time being, of course, figuring in the price of your labor as well. And then when the time comes, and just take them back to market, they'll be a little more full and a little heavier. And that's where you'd be able to make some money back off of that opportunity while managing the land. And of course, the other side of that is, like we're saying, throughout, buying implements and investing along those lines too, that would in turn, you could rent out or move forward in a separate consultation type direction there too. So yeah, there's definitely different ways of looking at it. Not one solution is the perfect solution for everybody. I think that's what I love about agriculture in general. No matter where you are, there's always definitely not one way or the highway type of management style for everyone. And I think that's probably my favorite thing about it. So there are options there. You just have to, sit down and scratch it out on paper. If you're to do cattle, what do cattle consume in a day? How much dry matter is there for those cattle to intake? Do they need a supplement? So they're getting their full nutrition, their nutritional needs met per day, or same with the goats as well, kind of figure that out as well. Could you buy more goats for the same price, and how much do they consume per day, and do they need to be supplemented, and how much time do you need to haul water back and forth? If you have to haul water, do you need to invest in fencing to continue to manage the land there and not let those things get away and get in everybody else's business? So there's a lot to that. Or do you have to hire someone to manage when you're not available? Because this thing that we do here, it's every day, 24/7, 8 days a week, really. And there are a lot of times where I do have to go and call on neighbors and pay them the fuel money and some day wages just to look after things for me when when we're doing other things as well. So yeah, tons to consider, and definitely something you just can't answer right here, right now.
Do you use electric fencing that you move back and forth frequently? Is that part of your infrastructure?
No, we do it on horseback. We'll just have to move cattle, and just kind of move them on horseback like so. So what we do is, like I said, we'll move water and we'll move the supplements into different areas where we want those cattle to loaf and rest during the days and the nights. But when they're not resting, they're out grazing, and we'll go out and just take one quick look, see where they like to normally commonly gather, and then find an area that they need to go and take care of. So that's where we'll spend that time on horseback to move the cattle in that direction, take them out there, basically like a sheep herder. And that's really how that growing sheep and wool was really successful in the early days, was because everybody was basically a sheep herder, and they're able to manage those things daily. And I think the reason why, of course, many Navajo people went in transition to cattle is because it's not as labor intensive in terms of day-to-day management. I can leave those cows out there for a couple of days, and I wouldn't have to worry about anything that might have gone wrong. Whereas with those sheep, if I'm not out there twice a day, looking right over them, then who knows what could happen. So that's kind of where things are currently in that process.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. And we're out of time, so I really appreciate all the great comments and questions. And Matt, do take a look into the chat. There's some questions as well. So yeah, many thanks to you for your work, for sharing with us today. I think we learned a ton, so I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I hope to see everyone again next month. We're still finalizing who will be our guest. It was supposed to be Paula Garcia, and she has been evacuated due to the fire in Mora. So it's uncertain at this point. So yeah, really difficult times. So anyway, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate you.
Yep.
And thank you everyone for joining tonight.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Isabel. Matthew.
Really great presentation.
Thank you.
Are you a good girl or you naughty girl?
Good girl.